I went to see if I could buy a bird, but this time realising the value of budgies and doing quite well breeding, even though I was selling them for pets, then I'd accumulated quite a nice kitty, as I thought, to go out and buy some top-class birds. So I went to Harry Makinson's, and there was a person there making out to be a beginner, but every time, even me as a beginner, every time he opened his mouth, it was obvious this guy knew a lot more about budgies. When he finally asked if he could buy any birds, I said, I'll go outside and look at your pheasants and poultry, Harry. He said, no, stop it. I said, no, it's a private deal with you and him. Now, whether that put me in good stead with him, the guy bought a bird, a cobalt cock, and went heading off down the path home. Harry invited me in and showed me the birds again. He was winning with a family off a Jack Fisher grey-yellow hen. Showing breeder birds, but it was putting some in any age and some in breeder, and getting best breeder in show and best in show with brothers in each section. So then I began reading up about buff and yellow, feathering and budgerigars, and he put me some birds up, which I was quite impressed with, but he put me up a lesser bird, which was a brother to the ones that were winning, a yellow feathered, quite a plain looking bird, but I've got this feeling that this would stand me in good stead. And then I asked him, of course, if I could possibly buy a hen to go with it, which he put me a sky blue hen up. I'd got £60, but he wanted £75 for these. So again, I finished up putting a deposit down and then going back and paying him the money later. I paired the pair up as he said, and got some quite good chicks, but I felt a grey hen of my own was a better pairing. So after I'd had 2 rounds with the sky hen, I put this grey hen to it and bred an outstanding light green hen, which was, you know, a bird ahead of its time, really. Somehow or other, Mrs. Moss got to know about this bird, and of course, and she phoned me up, which was like God phoning, and wanted to buy this hen. So I said, well, no, I don't want to sell it, Mrs. Moss. I want to be in this hobby for a while, but I'm quite prepared to lend it you on breeding terms. She would obviously pair this bird to a far superior bird than what I'd got in my shed. So she said, that's done, can you send it me down? So I pushed a little and said, well, can I bring the bird down and come and look at your birds? Of course, that was 275 miles to go, but off we went in my little Astra van and spent a long time with Mrs. Moss. It came out that she enjoyed hunting on horseback as I did, so we had a bit in common that way. And I always remember she used to go hunting side saddle on the Exmoor. But while I was there taking this hen down, I was able to purchase 2 birds. I bought an albino cock, which was a brother to the first albino to get best in show down there, and a dominant pied grey-green cock. I always remember as well that at the manor house, King's Kerswell, where Mrs. Moss used to live, stood outside the big gates and pressed the bell and nobody answered. I was stood there quite a while, so I decided to walk up. And halfway between the gate and the front door, this massive English bull terrier came racing down. People who knew Mrs. Moss will remember this dog. It was quite notorious. But fortunately, it took to me and didn't attack me. So then, as I say, with Mrs. Moss, we got talking about horses. And then over the years, I bought many birds off her and swapped birds. And this particular year, and then what happened, she'd had a fallout with a Lutino breeder called Miss Kirby Mason. And she wanted to buy some of my best Lutinos for sale, to breed Lutinos to give Kirby Mason a run for her money. Well, as that happened, as I said earlier, we just got married and we were moving house. So the birds, I was overstocked with birds. So I said, well, I'll not sell you any, Mrs. Moss. I'll lend you the whole set of Lutinos, which I did do. And, you know, I got some chicks back. I've still got the pedigrees of all those birds in a lovely script on her letterhead. One of the hens I brought back, which had her ring on, MQ99 882, got me best breeder, best Lutino breeder, and a CC at the, sorry, not breeder, best Lutino when the club show was at Leeds. That was MQ99 882. We remained very good friends, virtually up to a death, Mrs. Moss. At this particular time, I'd let her have some golden faces bred off my Malcontin Spangles. And then I went down this particular time. She took me into the aviary, left me in there, and went to make she used to make cucumber sandwiches with no crusts on and coffee. I was looking in the flight and saw this lovely opening light green cock that was slightly ticked. Typical moss bird, really broad shoulders with large spots. And I thought, dare I ask for that bird? When she came back, we got talking. She said, had I seen anything I liked? And I mentioned that I'd got my own this opening light green cock. Well, she used to use a monocle to look at the birds, and she put that in her eye. And she's looking at this bird, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to get this. And then she just turned to me and says, I think I owe you that. And she wouldn't take any money off me. She gave it me. And I remember it only took me 5 hours to get back from Torbay. I'd got it paired to about 20 hens by this time in my mind. Anyway, when I paired this bird up, I came home from work and the hen was on the perch that it was paired to with blood all over her face. Couldn't see the opening light green cock. He was on the floor. She'd bit a toe off, broke his wing and took his eye out. He was virtually at death's door. I got him out of the cage and I managed to save him, but I thought, well, he's no good for breeding now. So I used to keep him in the cage to look at what might have been and had him to feed the young chicks when I weaned them. Just excuse me a minute.
Is he on the shot, somebody?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I've just shut the door. The wife's on the phone to Dubai. My son-in-law, my son and daughter-in-law are expecting a baby any time over there. Anyway, this bird, he started trying to tread the barhead hens. And I'm thinking, well, if I'd had my arm broken and then I took out the knife, the last thing I think about was trying to mate. But I thought, well, where there's a will, there's a way. So I put him in a cage with a hen. And of course, what happened is the hen was flying backwards and forwards on the perches. The poor old lad was dropping to the floor, running across, climbing up the cage to get to the perch. And by the time he got there, the hen was at the other side. So I finished up putting in a perch diagonally from the top right-hand back corner to the front left-hand corner. And he could hop across and she could fly. And I bred 14 chicks off that bird. You know, you try to breed with feather perfect birds and they don't breed. And there's one that was a cripple, and he certainly put me on the map with the birds that he bred. The next big highlight, besides my marriage and the birth of my lad and my daughter, was I had the opportunity to go. Oh, what I forgot to mention is in 1991. Well, in 1984, I was made redundant with the miners' strike and started in business for £3,400. It was quite a struggle to get going initially, but we managed it. But then the 91 recession, my biggest customer went bankrupt on me, owing me £250,000, besides other people. That was a terrible time. I employed 15 people at that time, but I was responsible for 44. That was the wife and kids. I had a Volvo 960 estate, and I did anything to get money to keep the firm afloat and keep all my staff in jobs. So I sold that car and bought an Astra, and I was running about in an Astra, and my wife and I, we sold birds to live. I drew no wages out of the firm for 9 months so that I could keep all my staff. I managed to do that, and it was quite a long time. Volvo had announced that they were bringing out an XC90 four-wheeler, and I thought, I'm going to order one. It was a 2-year waiting list. I ain't got 2 pennies to rub together, but I thought, that's my incentive now. I've got to turn this business round to get this car in 2 years' time. We began to see daylight. The business turned around over the next 2 or 3 years. And so I booked a buffet. We used to have a Christmas dinner, but I booked a buffet in a pub just as a morale booster for the staff to say, we made it, we've got through, and we've all still got jobs. At that meeting, my shop foreman, who I always thought were a bit left-wing, stood up and they said, Phil, you said you'd get us through it. You have done. We've all put together, keep putting a lump in my throat telling you this, we've all put together and bought you this gold watch in appreciation for what you've done. I still have that watch, and when I'm feeling a bit low, I go and get it out and look at it. Anyway, back to my tale. So I've sold birds to live. Amongst these was a sky blue cock. I sold to a chap called Steve Robertson from down there, which bred him a light green cock that I believe went to Japan for £7,000. The brother to that one went to Don Havenhand, and it's still on the internet that Don says the best bird he ever bought as an outcross was the sky blue cock of mine. I think it's called Reaney Sky Blue Cock if you go on the internet. So as I slowly got back into the birds, during this time as well, Frank Silver made contact with me, he'd seen the birds that Steve Robertson had bought and was hoping to buy something similar. So he came up and he finished up buying a grey-green pied cock. He was questioning me for it, and I think he thought I was going to take his eyes out price-wise. But I valued that bird at £75, which he bought. And then from then on, we became very good friends. He was quite outspoken and upset a number of people, but he was always good and fair to me. And in fact, when I got back to getting into breeding exhibition birds in '95, I went down to Frank's to see if I could buy some birds. He just opened his flight, not his sales flight, his flight, said, go in there and see what you want. So I picked 6 birds out, which were out of his main flight. And I said, how much would you want for them? He says, I don't want a penny. He says, you've been a good friend to me and helped me. So that's a good sign that perhaps some people didn't see a Frank Silver, but that was the help he gave me. Then the next big highlight really was the opportunity to go to Germany to see, on a YBS trip. We went to a show, and their molting team was showing quite a number of birds. Amongst them were some spangles, a cobalt spangle cock and a funny coloured thing, which it turned out later that it was let me get this right, it was a golden-faced spangled white mauve. At this time, Malcontin couldn't speak English, so this is where Gerald Binks and his Budrigar World came to the fore, because they had an interpreter, and I said I would like to buy these birds, which I bought them both, and Vic Smith was on the trip, and he asked to see what I'd bought, and he took a shine to the Cobalt Spangle. So he'd been a good mentor to me, and at that time was also my landlord. We'd moved into the farm cottage that his mother used to live in. So I gave him the Cobalt Spangle. My own bird, this funny coloured bird, I paid my best hen to it while it was in quarantine, and it bred 2 chicks. And one of those chicks, when it came out of quarantine, I showed at Castleford Show and got Best Breeder in Show. It was a golden face cobalt spangle. The same bird later at the YBS, Pete Sanderson wrong classed it as a dark green. This is the controversy we used to have with golden face birds that turned and looked almost like a green series. Is it still interesting, this? Are you all still awake?
Absolutely. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You go for it, Phil.
Okay. So then I've had best in show at the YBS more than 7 times, twice with the same bird as a breeder and any age. This cobalt was actually a bird that Harry Bryan tried to buy off me, and he got up to £2,000 for it. But fortunately, I was in a position to say no. He worked a flanker on me a few years before, so there was no way he was going to get the bird. The next bird that really did a lot for me was an Oakland cinnamon grey green, ring number R25147576. I used to show him, who was a lovely show bird, and a buffer brother, which was slightly flecked. And for 76 and 77, the buff bird always beat the yellow feathered bird. And then in 78, the buff bird went out of condition, so I only showed the show bird. He won the class, won the CC, and got best in show at the YBS, which was at the Corn Exchange in Leeds. That bird went on to get many best in shows, Liverpool, the YBS. He got me best intermediate any age at the BS Club show. I was presented with the trophy, but with Galib's Al Nasser's old partner. He was the president at the time. That bird I showed at the National, and I've only shown at the National 3 times in 50 years, and I've had best in show each time. I was an intermediate at the time when it got best in show down at Alexandra Palace, and there was an American calling for me. I'd actually gone home for the weekend, calling for me with a view to buying the bird to take to America. But I wasn't there, so he had to fly home. But that bird, a chap called Robert Stake, some of you may know, in Scotland, he phoned up to try to buy the bird, and he offered me £750 for it. Well, we were just moving house to our new home, and we wanted a front room carpet, which was £600. So the budgie had to go. So we took it up to Scotland to Robert Staines, and came back and bought the carpet and used £150 to buy some other outcross birds. He came down the following year and offered me £1,000 for the son of the same bird. And I said, well, you know, you'll be one, you've got the father. He said, well, I'd rather have the son than the father. I said, well, you've got the father because I've bred the son, which also became a champion bird. Just an aside, people moan about money people and what have you in this hobby. I was showing against the chairman of Domestos, who had a Bentley. I had a 2-stroke James motorbike. And in the beginners, he was beating me left, right and centre. But what I used to do is go to the judges and say, can you explain to me why this person's birds beat mine? And he pointed out various features and things. Harry Makinson was very good at this time, and one of his best pieces of advice that I've ever had, he said, go for width of head, lad. If you have a wide head, you're going to have wide shoulders and a good sweep to the mass. So I started trying to buy birds and pair birds up with this advice, and we got into novice, and I started beating him a few times in some classes, and by the end of novice I was winning more than he was, and he packed up.
Phil, Phil, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
About 8 o'clock. Can we, those who want to go outside and go and clap your hands, by all means do. Those that don't want to, just stay on here and clap on here or do whatever. So we'll see you back in about 5 minutes. just stay on and carry on, do your thing, huh?
Okay.
You want to chat about something else, anyone? Something going on?
It's clap time, mate.
This is my clapper. They can hear me.
I'm back out there tonight.
Put the shopping down, Paddy. Put your shopping down.
Warm up. John.
That woke a few of them up.
A whole street down this way. Looks like we've got another 3 or 4 weeks of it.
Yes. And I reckon after that,
Make another bath. I mean, another bath.
they might let a few of the youngsters go back to work in 3-4 weeks' time.
Yeah.
But the old fogies will be made to stay home, I reckon.
Yeah.
Nice. 10:35.
Oh,
Well, that's my weekly exercise done.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
35 there. All right. 35 on attendees at the moment.
Right, there's, yeah. That's not funny enough. I don't think you can see that, can you?
Where is it, Phil?
It's, sorry, it's, you see that's Ron Biswell when he was presenting it with Best Intermediate Any Age at the CS Club Show.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Oh. Yes, this is a person that, no. Can you see that?
Tell us, Phil, tell us about Ron Bissell then. He was Garrick's old partner.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's really all I know about him. That, you know, he was president at that time and gave me that.
Yeah, Tom, can I get... No, that's the washing machine, sir.
All right.
Yeah. Tony, you might need to do some muting again for a while.
Yeah, I'm just muting everybody at the moment.
Okay.
So get back to my next pages now. I was just putting that picture on. This is the next stage really that had a big impact on me. That's me with Joe Mans of Germany when I first went over. When I first got back into the birds, as I say, I'd hardly any exhibition birds left in '95. But then I had the opportunity to go on a coach trip to see Joe Mans birds in Germany in 1996. In the meantime, I'd been and bought stock back off people who bought my birds over the last 4 years. And a number of them had actually got hold of some Joe Mans blood and had put my birds to them. So the birds I bought back off them had got part Mans blood in already. So this meant that I could go to Joe and hopefully get a good bird, and I knew it would nick because I'd got the bloodline already. And I actually bought a grey-pied cock for €500 at that time. And of course, I came back to it, and that really started the line that I've got now. The best in show at the National in 2016 was a sky blue pied off that particular line. Going over to Joe's, we became very good friends. And what I'd actually said to him was that I wanted in a few years' time to be in a position to let him have a bird back. What we used to do on the trip is that we drew numbers out of a hat. And what happened is you went in the sales flight in that order. Number one went in first, pick one bird, and then if you wanted to buy it, fair enough. If not, it went back in, but he didn't have another choice. So we went all through the 26 people on the trip, and then after that it was a free-for-all. You went in the flight and bought whatever you wanted, but everybody had that first opportunity, and this worked very well. We did that trip for I would say 12 years, and I could write a book on some of the escapades that went off on that. It was a men being boys trip. In fact, if you look at the three amigos, the three chefs on the television at the moment, Gino and who have you, we had a lot of similar antics to that. Great times, great memories. So I bought quite a few birds off of Joe over the years. We used to go twice a year. In February, we used to go over, 3 of us in the car, and pick out, you know, birds that we would hope we could buy. These were the adult birds. And then we'd pick them up on the coach trip in May. So when we started doing that, I wouldn't go in the hat. I wouldn't, you know, I'd got some birds, so I used to let someone else go in my place. So this went on for many, many years. And what actually happened in the end is that I knew Joe was after some lace wings, and he tried to get the best one off Jack Coyton, which he wouldn't let him have. So they had a fallout. Well, I'd just got best in show with a lacewing hen, which I had 2 sisters. So I took the lacewing hen over to Joe, the best in show one, and gave it him. Then what happened is later on in the year, I had some Australians come to visit, look at the birds, and they were admiring the lacewing sister, the one that I'd kept. And I said, well, the better one went to Germany, and left it at that. The next time I go to Joe's, he turns on me and says, don't you ever tell people I've had a bird off you? I said, well, I haven't, Joe. And what had happened, these Australians, unbeknown to me, were going to Joe's the following day after visiting me. And they'd gone in and they'd spotted this lace-wing hen and said, "Is that Phil Reaney's lace-wing hen?" So, you know, that was a bit of a shock to me, really, but I've not told them. But I was able to do, as I said, let Joe have a bird back for the one that he'd had. Let's go into Germany, put all that in.
Can I ask a question, Phil? Just to interrupt you. You said that if there was 26 of you and you all went in the hat, and number one, he goes in, does he then have the choice of every bird that's in the sales flight?
That's right.
He picks out what he wants and then he comes out and number two goes in.
That's it, yeah. If one bird puts it in a show cage, which Joe's show cages were round the corner from where the sales flight was. Excuse me. And you pick that bird, you put it in a cage, Joe would tell you a price and you either bought it or it went back in the flight. You didn't have another pick, you had that one pick. Do you understand what I mean with that?
I do, yeah. That's what I was a bit confused at. So you pick out a bird that you like and you put it in the show cage and then he tells you the price, and if you don't want to pay it, you don't get another go.
You don't get another go till all 26 have been in and had their pick. And then after that, you could go in, and of course, in those days, the quality was exceptional, you know, so even when you were 26, you've got a chance of buying a decent bird. And of course, with his bloodline, it was quite prepotent. There weren't many people didn't breed good chicks off them, for sure. In fact, that's why that trip went on for many years, because we're all hungry to go back and get some more of the same. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, perfectly. I understand now. Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I've covered the recession and the to do with my business. Well, then with my business, my health had suffered during this recession. I actually had a breakdown, but I couldn't take medication because I'd got to run the business and keep strong for the rest of my staff. So that was quite a trying time for 4 years, really. And it made me really evaluate my life. Is that I think a lot of blokes, you want to do the best for your wife and kids, and you forget that in my case, in my business, I was working long hours, and when the kids were young, they were in bed when I went to work and in bed when I got home. But of course, you want to give them the best of everything that you can possibly afford. But of course, if I'd have gone bust, I couldn't have given them anything. So it made me really rejig my life that, you know, a lot of the important time was also family time with the kids. Another big event, really, I was having a big birthday bash for my 50th birthday, and my father died 2 days before. We still had the bash because I'm sure my dad would have wanted to, but it was quite a traumatic time, that really, to go through. So I said, we had a lot of German trips. We met Jack Coyton, who I'd known many years. And when it was the BS Club show, we used to have a good get-together in the Regent pub. There'd be me, Reaney Halen, Daniel Lutoff, Jack Coyton. We used to all discuss feather and head qualities and buff and yellow, etc. They were great nights. Quite often it was daylight before we were going to bed. So that's the club show, really. I had some great times at the club show, being involved there. The first time I judged the club show was in 1991, and I judged Lutinos, and in the champion any age Lutino cocks, there were 76 in the class. That's not in the whole show, that's just in the class. And there was 40-odd Lutino breeders in the champion breeder class. So that was quite a challenge as my first experience of judging the club show, which I've judged 7 or 8 times now. which I'm very flattered with. So then, we've now moved to Lincoln. My daughter went to Lincoln Uni. She works for the police, and met an RAF lad who she married, and we've now got 2 grandkids. So I'm semi-retired, and we moved to Lincoln into our current house to help with babysitting, etc. And my son, he got an accountancy degree, and he works for a very big company in Dubai. And they're currently expecting any day now another grandson. I've been all over the world judging and giving lectures. All my judging fees and lectures I donate to a Masonic charity for orphan boys and girls. It's another thing that I got quite into, but of late I'm just what they call a country member. Very proud of the good work that Masons do all over the world. It's great to be a member of such an organisation. We moved to Lincoln. I've got a new bird room, which I think I have a photo of. If you just bear with me, I'll get that up. That's actually the back of our house. Where are we? Can't see where I am. No. Oh, there we are.
That's it.
Can you see it? That's the back of the house. This is a tour really of going around the area there. This a walk around my garden at the moment is 0.06 of a mile. So 52 laps is 3¼ miles. So that's how I'm keeping fit and keeping the sanity there. That's just walking around showing you. We're going around the other way now. There's a clock golf actually, which I've done. I was a member as a lad, went to an aunt, and so we've got like a putting green, which is just down below these beams in a minute. I can't see very well what I'm showing you here, so anyway, here we go.
Reminds me of my backyard, actually.
Sorry,
All the ones that have been in my backyard are laughing now, aren't you? Yeah, because you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on, Phil.
Okay, yeah, so then I'll just go back to, that's the actual aviary. There. Planning here is brilliant. It's designed in the style of a bungalow, because when I get old and decrepit and can't look after birds, the wife and I will more than likely move into there. The left-hand side is a breeding room with French windows out onto a patio, so I'm able to take the cages out and clean them outside. The middle, I have a toilet, a storeroom which would become the bathroom, and a kitchen. And then the right-hand side has some Malcantine mobile flights, which I'll show you next. Let's have a look. Where are we? Is that? Oh, wait a bit. Start from the start. That's my bank of. Where are we? That's the flights, which are oh dear, not Malcantine, sorry, Ostringer mobile flights. They drop down to get under the door, through the doorway, so I can jet wash these out on the patio. They have a hole bang in the middle of each section. They're in 3 sections. You just lift the lid up and sweep all the stuff out into a bucket underneath. These are the views that we have over towards Lincoln Cathedral, which you can just see on the skyline. So it's lovely. We have a great outlook. We're in the country, so really enjoy it. So judging here and abroad, I've done America, I've done Norway, Sweden, Belgium, Holland, Ireland. Had some great times in Ireland. And in fact, this last year, Jerry Lanigan had invited me to go over to judge their big show. And I was that keen, I went there a week early. I've had my leg pulled quite a bit about this. I got out of the airport at Dublin and saying, "Where are you all? There's nobody to pick me up." He says, "There won't be, it's next week." I got the wrong week. So I had to go, well, they entertained me for an hour or two. One of their members is a printer. And I gave my genetics lecture, the atom bomb and dynamite, which they got quite a few members to watch. This originated at the YBS many years ago with pieces of card with X and Y on. It then became, as I say, a big presentation, which again I've shown all, all over Europe. And I actually gave them a memory stick with it on and said, if you want to sell it to your members to raise a few funds, you're quite welcome. Little did I know, they now advertise it in Jerry's the Budrigar book. And when I got to the club show that year, there's people coming up to me and saying, "I've got your book, I've got your book." So apparently it's gone all over Europe. Had I known, I would have made it much bigger, and I have other presentations I would have put on the same memory stick, but that's perhaps something to do in my presidential year. So, as I say, I've won the National 3 times. I've only shown there 3 times. First with an open cinnamon grey green cock, then with a dominant pied sky blue, and latterly with a cinnamon yellow face sky blue, which I do think I've got a photo of, if I can find it quickly. These are, I'll show you some of my stock when I get to the...
Phil, while you're looking for that photo,
Yeah.
what makes you show at the BS World Show? Is it because you've got the bird you think you can win with? You said you've showed 3 times, you won 3 times. That just makes me think, well, I've got. If it was me thinking like that, I'd think, I've got a bird here, I think I can win with it. I'll put it in the show. Is that what you do?
Not really, no. It was just a matter of convenience, really. Having my own business, I struggle to do a lot of showing because most of my time's been taken up judging. Sometimes I'm judging on a Saturday, it can be in Edinburgh, and I can be in Exeter on the Sunday. So I did a lot more judging than I did showing. I enjoy judging. But now I want to reverse that, and I want to, do more showing if I can. So no, it was just a coincidence, really, that, I've only showed 3 times. I would like to show more. But now, of course, we're doing that and telling people, you think, well, there I show again and not get best in show.
Yeah.
This is a bird that I've bred this last year. That's had quite a few, comments on that people like. That's my old golden face line, again, going way back, many years. That's a cinnamon golden face hen. I'm trying to find that cock. I'll put 1 or 2 up of my birds that I've got currently, just to let people see. That's an Oakland light green hen off the man's line. This bird's bred me some real super cinnamon Oaklands and cinnamon Oakland pies this year. He's got spots as big as my fingernails, that cock. Lovely cock. That's a better photo of him, really. This is a dark green that's bred me my best youngster this year. Dark green hen, which has been on Facebook. That's a split clear body. That actually got best breeder in show at Lincoln Open Show this year. It's just hatched his first chick today with a Lutino hen. That's the same bird face on. These are straight out of the breeding cage, by the way. Cinnamon sky blue hen, which is a daughter of the cinnamon yellow face I'm trying to find. Spangled hen. That's a Lutino. Baby, this is baby some cracking youngsters. I've lost the best chick off this, ring number 20. Lovely sky blue hen, bred last year. That's another typical cinnamon hen. These are a couple of babies, up in dark green, cobalt. That's an opening dark green. I like big spots on birds if I can get them. That's where I use the man's feather, if you like. Oh, that's the daughter of the cinnamon. You can see the amount of spots she's got. She's about 4 rows of spots, that hen.
That'd take some spotting out, that would, wouldn't it?
Blooming wood, if you look at its throat, were cut. That's the yellow face grey. Oh, that's my last man's bird. That's an open cinnamon olive from Joe Man's. I've just let some champions in Lincoln have that hen. She's 2 years old, 3 years old, sorry. 2 breeding seasons.
Can I ask you, Phil, when you go out to buying an outcross, what are you actually looking for? And anything in particular? Are you looking for a particular feature when you go, or are you looking for size, or are you looking for what?
Well, it varies year on year to, you know, what I'm looking for really. But you know, you're wanting to buy a feature as a beginner and novice. You're trying to buy the complete bird, which, you know, as you get older, you realise that you can't really do that. They're the birds that the breeders want to keep themselves. But one of the things, as I say, I got very much into the buff and yellow theory. And one of the first things I'll do when I visit a breeder is I'll walk down the breeding cages and see what his pairings are like. And if he's pairing mainly buff to yellow birds, whether it be a buff hen to a yellow cock or a yellow cock to a buff hen, I'm quite prepared to buy a yellow feathered chick off that pair, because yellow feathered birds can be split buff, where a buff can't be split yellow. And you'll hear time and time again people when they're showing a winning bird saying, and the parents look nothing. But both parents were split buff to breed that super bird. So I like to look at the breeding techniques of what the breeder is doing, how he's pairing birds up. Whether he line breeds or inbreeds is another thing I look at, what he's trying to breed with. I've just got a photo. I take on a rare variety for a few years to try and improve it. I don't know if you'll be able to read these or not. You won't, I don't think. But this is, you'll be able to tell from the coloured squares, but these are my recessive, this were my recessive pies. And if you look, I paired brother to sister, then a son to to its mother, and then a grandson to the same mother. What happened, I threw one opening violet recessive pied hen out with really broad feather. And in those days, you used to have to pull the cage bars closer together to stop the recessive pieds flying out of the cage. And that was really the breakthrough. I'd put a dark green cock of my own with big spots into the recessives. I actually sold some recessive pieds back to Australia when we had the imports, you know, of birds. Twice I sent those birds to Australia. I sent some to America and some into Germany. And then I got rid of my recessive pieds. They all went to Alan Michael. And I was trying to get back into grey wings and dilutes, which were one of the first varieties that I actually had. So I'm still on trying to get those back. I'd let Sam Wiles have quite a few of that family, and he let me have a cock back, a grey wing grey cock, which I'm now trying to work on to breed them back. So then, you know, features, I like to buy a feature.
Right, we lost Phil. Phil's disappeared for a minute, Tony.
You there?
He's coming back. There you go.
Here. Sorry. It
Press
was
the wrong
buzzy
button.
time, trying to pick my brain. Yeah, so it varies on what I'm looking for. I try to buy into families, into family types. I always maintain you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And if I'm after a particular bloodline, it doesn't necessarily mean I won't go to the top breeder of that line. I will try and buy birds off lesser people that have been there and bought that bloodline. So then I get a nucleus of a family with that bloodline in, and then I will go to the top man and buy a very good bird to put into that family. So the work is not in buying the outcross that year, it's in developing a family to put that outcross into the following year. Does that explain? Yeah?
Yeah, I'd like to know if you consider yourself a line breeder or an inbreeder or both. What's your opinion? What I've just asked you.
I'm all three. I do
Say
all
again, sorry?
Me, I do all three. A line breed, inbreed and outcross. Really, a breeder should be doing that every year. Some of the family would be breeding in to fix certain types on both chromosomes. On some others, it'll be line breeding, trying to get a family likeness but a very slight variation in type, and exploring the potential of that bird. And then you will have the outcross. I say the outcross. These days, it's all too easy to go out and buy 5 or 6 birds at a time, and if they don't do well, they go out and buy another 5 or 6. But when I was developing my stud and not having much money, it was buying the outcross. One bird. You used to go and try and buy one bird with a feature that you were trying to do. And it's all about trying to breed your own. Albeit, I'm not against showing both birds, especially these days with the bench figure. If my own bird's not fit and I've got the same variety in any age classes, I will put any bird in of that same colour to keep the bench entry up. And I do believe the very word open show means open. You're taking on all comers. And if we said it was breeder only birds, you're still going to come unstuck, because if you've got a good bird and a big money man comes along and offers you telephone figures for that bird, a lot of people can't afford not to take the offer. So then that bird is taken off the show circuit and we never see it again. So I much prefer the existing rule where in any age we can show both birds if needed, but in the breeders obviously it's breeder only. With the situation this year, I've made the suggestion, which was going to be at the next council meeting, but of course they're cancelled, is that perhaps this coming year, because we've no show season this year, is that we have a breeder A and a breeder B class, where all the 2020 birds would be in the A class and all the 2021 would be in the B. It would give the birds bred this year a chance to compete against their own age group, just for the next year, not for forever, but just for the next year, to give them birds a chance on the show bench with their own equivalents.
Yeah, I think that's, I've heard that being suggested, and I do think it's a good idea, but my main worry is do we have, we've got the 2 classes at the moment, and those, a lot of those classes are not fulfilled in numbers. So if we have then 3 classes, i.e. 20s, 21s, and then any age, is it going to reduce the numbers so much that we're not going to have hardly any birds in the class?
Well, one of my other things, which I tried to give at the last seminar, but it got cut short, is I was asking people about the classification. I think for normal championship shows, we've far too many classes, and this is what's depleted the numbers. When I last analysed some birds, about 2011, the 3 biggest varieties were Sky Blue, Cinnamon Sky Blue, and Spangle. Well, of course, Spangle we've now split into 3, so that decimates the numbers. I think that for championship classes, we ought to go back to an 18cc classification, all the rare varieties. Every area society now has a specialist and rare show. Yes, put the specialist, put all the classes in for the specialist and rare there, but let's have a bit more common sense where a CC is worth winning. If you go back to that 91 year, there was something like 400 Lutinos at the club show. We don't get that number of birds at shows, never mind one variety. So I think a radical overhaul of classification would be worthwhile. For instance, if we put all the blues together, that sky blues and dark factor, cobalts and mauves, what you could do, you could judge that as a class, but we'll say sky blue wins that class, keep the highest placed cobalt back, and do that through the sections. And then when you do the CC, say a cobalt wins the CC, that gets the number of points for the complete entry, but then the highest placed sky blue gets a 1 point CC. You get what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. This actually brings up a question that I was sent from Ray Welfare earlier on. And he asks, what changes would you make to the Budgeriggar Society, if anything? And I wonder if that comes into it, or is that a too wide a question for the moment?
I do have a lot of ideas and plans, and of course the thing is that what you've got to do is get people alongside you. A confrontation, a head-to-head, is no good at all. So you've got to try. It was brought up on Facebook a while ago about this 2/3 majority rule. Well, if it's a good thing, it'll eat 2/3 majority, won't it? It'll get the backing. If it's not getting the backing and it's only a minority that vote for it, well, we don't want it anyway, because it's only a minority actually perhaps furthering their own interests. So the whole thing is to sell the idea. I do have I do a presentation where I've asked various questions from members what they would like to see. I'd like to think I'd be a mover and shaker representing the hobby as a whole with good ideas, and hopefully my time on the General Council able to convince some of the rest of the council to take up some of my ideas or suggestions. So I believe in a constructive way of trying to do things, not a destructive way. I always say, when I ran Sheffield Society, I always say to them, well, at work I used to say the same, don't come to me with a problem without you've got a solution. It might not be the solution I finish up using, but at least you've got the person thinking positively, not negatively. So that would be how I'd try and put some of these things over to the General Council to let them see that they're satisfied it's a good idea.
Okay. Sorry, I was going to say at this time, there's no questions or not many coming through. So a few people might not know about that chat button at the bottom. If you put your cursor over down the bottom, about ½ inch from the bottom, you'll see a chat box. If you press the chat box, you can send me private messages and ask for a question to be asked, or you can ask it yourself. But for anybody else, what you can do also is, I can see you all, is just wave your arms around like this, and in the end, me or Tony will see you, and we will unmute you, and you can ask a question yourself. So
sorry, John, that won't work.
Won't it? No?
I can't see everybody on the one screen.
If you have to flash between the two.
Yeah,
I
wouldn't be able to do that all the time.
So all right, okay. So preferably send me a private message. But somebody did just shake his hands there. It was Kevin Bohr. So can you unmute Kevin and let him ask a question? Kevin, you're unmuted, mate.
Oh, fine, John. I've just waved my hand to say, John, I've sent you a question on PM to ask Phil, but never mind, I'll ask it.
Sorry.
Well done. Phil, we've bumped in occasionally a few times. I know you've well-travelled, been to many studs, judging engagements, visits and so on. And I'm sure you're walking somewhere and you're completely surprised and overwhelmed with what you've seen, the depth of quality or a particular feature. So if you had to name 5 studs you'd go to an outcross for a particular feature, what would they be and why?
Oh, crikey, that's a good one. Well, I mean, Lutoff, you cannot take away that the man is an excellent breeder of birds. And Fred Wright really did him a justice with the photos that were in caged birds. I love that face that he's now got on the birds, which I believe is a blend of my idea of blending the long feather with the broad feather. Broad feather generally coming from Man's or Moss, and narrow feather from Huxley and Marchant and the Moorhouse stroke Wilson birds. So yeah, there's some good birds there. Mike Bowles, I was very impressed when I went down there, because he recently got the Hockaday stud, which is one of the more recent studs I've visited, and was really impressed with those birds. So that's another one that would be on my list. Jack Coyton, of course, and we swap birds, and I buy a number of birds from Jack most years. Reaney Halen, his stud has got quite a lot of quality and depth. The big question, of course, is how much do you want to get involved with birds that carry the long flight? But I think there's nothing wrong with people breeding with long flights. But what I object to is the people that cheat and show them on the show bench with the pulled tails, etc. I don't like cheating. Other studs. Well, there's a number of the Miller studs, that's got quite a lot of good birds in depth. But there are also people that are not on the circuit, if you like. There's 1 or 2 good breeders I know of that are only small studs and don't show. But certainly I call every year and hope to try and get a bird off them. So without putting a finger at specific studs, I've mentioned 1 or 2 of the bigger ones I would like to procure birds from. But there's people like yourself and other people that buy birds off these top studs. And I would like to get round more. I got spoilt really. We're going to Jack Coyton and Joe Mann's for many years. I was able to buy the birds I wanted and go back quite content. So generally I lost touch on the UK circuit of the breeders that are doing it. But this is what I hope to change now that I'm retired or virtually retired, to get round a lot of these studs and have a good look at what birds are around. Does that answer your question? Yeah?
Yeah, Kevin says yes. Thank you. Carry on then, Phil, if you've...
One of the things I did do many years ago is I was very keen on nutrition and did a lot of research into that. I bought a lot of nutrition books. I remember one cost me this is over nearly 40 years ago, one cost me £80, one book that I got on nutrition. And of course, seeing Kevin there prompted me to think about the nutrition side. And I evolved my own seed mixture, which you may know is a country. I get no commission, by the way, or anything for this, but I just let Countrywide do it for the good of the hobby. But I was one of the first breeders to use hemp and Niger, which are oil seeds, in my basic budrigar mix. And I understand that it's the top seller for Countrywide. That shift a hell of a lot of it. I evolved that formula nearly 40 years ago, and I'm a big believer if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I say I know a lot of breeders all over the country and even abroad use that mixture. I did start trying to evolve my own supplement to go to it, but I like gardening. I used to grow all my own vegetables at the old house, and also feed some of my tenants in some of the houses that lived too near to me. And I actually bent down one night at dusk and put an iron stake through my eye. So I couldn't do any more reading and research. So that's been shelved for the time being. The aviary I've got now, it's got air conditioning, which is a good thing because it can either keep it cool or keep it warm. But
Bill, can I just interrupt? I'm really sorry, but somebody put in a question that a couple of your last comments, it worked perfectly for the question I was given from Mark, and it was to ask you if your Reaney mix has recently changed, because some he bought from Countrywide recently looked different.
Yeah, what happened, and of course I took them to task over this, the mixture should have white millet in. And without my permission, what they did is apparently the white millet crop that was available was poor, so they didn't buy any and put brown millet in, which is a slightly dearer seed, in place of it. Of course, then technically it's not really the Reaney mix because it hasn't got white millet in. So I phoned up and complained about this and said it should have been right, that you should have notified me you were altering my mixture. But now what's happened is that my last delivery, they're actually putting Bear's white millet into my mixture in place of the brown millet. So it's now, or should, if people ask for it with the white millet in, you should now get that mixture.
All right, is that all right with you, Mark? Yeah, done. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, carry on.
One comment I will say, because I remember seeing on Facebook saying it's got cod liver oil on. It has an oil, but it's a polish. It very much like when you buy the chocolate raisins or chocolate nuts. There's like a glaze on the chocolate. Well, they use it's only minuscule. It might be a teaspoon in a tub just to put a polish on the seed. It's more a cosmetic thing. And of course, they have to put on the bag that it's got this on. But it's nowhere near what we would normally dose birds with cod liver oil, etc. It's just meant as a marketing thing for it to be clean, shiny seed, if you like. And it's general practice. It's not just Countrywide that do this. It is a general practice. Right. And what is that oil, Phil? There's a vegetable oil. I think it's sharp. I've forgotten that. There's 3 different oils that are blended to put this polish on and to give it stability. But that's all it is. It's a cosmetic thing. Right. A big issue when the BS, I offered this mixture to the BS and it wasn't taken up. Otherwise, it would have been a BS mix and all proceeds would have gone to the Budgerigar Society. But when they had Bucktons, of course, they set up agents to sell this seed. But what they didn't do is instruct how to look after seed when you store it. And when I was a young lad, if it were raining on the farm, we used to be up in the barn rotating the sacks of oats and wheat so that what was on the top was on the bottom, and we always made sure there was at least a foot away from the wall because seed can draw damp off a wall that it's stacked against. So seed should be off the floor, air should be able to get right round it, and it shouldn't touch a wall. Now, I remember going to 2 breeders and they were saying that they thought the mixture was rubbish because it had got white mould on it. Well, it wasn't from the seller of the seed, the wholesaler, it was how it had been looked after, where they were buying their seed from. Yeah? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've got another question here, please, Phil.
Yeah.
It's from Ian. Is that Ian Stanley that wanted to ask that question? Yeah, it is. Tony, can you unmute Ian, please? All right, Ian, away you go. One for you, Ian and Phil.
Hello, Phil. Nice to see you.
Yeah, same to you. Regards to you also.
Yeah, and we know you can talk a long time, as I can as well. As Marion, my wife, told me and you got me into trouble several times. But that said, following on from your show about the shows for next year, I've got to disagree and agree with John, and I know the BS are looking at what to do next year. I think it would be wrong. It will be an adult bird next year, unless you're talking about moving towards 2-year breeder classes, and you're not saying that, you're saying it will revert back, then it will be an adult bird, and it will be in competition, the same as it would have been if it had been shown as a young bird this year. And I think the problem is 2 factors. One is it will devalue the CC, as John has said, but the other factor is that you're bringing in an awful lot of logistic problems for the show secretary in actually being able to manage this whole load of new paperwork, whole load of new returns for 1 year only. Just not worth it. Let's go forward like we did when we had the infection before. What do you think?
Well, no, I disagree. I think it would be a good thing. It wouldn't devalue the CC, because what would happen is you would have a 2021 bird, a 2020 bird, and any age bird in all the sections. So it wouldn't devalue the CC. The entries would still be the same total. But as I say, I do feel we have too many classes anyway, and it's that that's devalued the CCs.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and I think, yeah, we need to cater for these lesser varieties, but surely each area has a specialist and rare show, so why not put the classes, expand the specialist and rare shows to accommodate these rarer varieties?
I understand that. That's not a problem. My worry is that the extra work, I'm show manager, and my show secretary is not here, right? They will go berserk if you think of the extra work you're creating for them. We used to do this with foreign birds, where we split you have a seed eater class and you'd pick out a best of a different variety. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
A lot of work for show secretary.
I have to agree to disagree, because I don't think it would be. I've already evolved a situation for our members show in Lincoln, where all the light greens, any age, are in one class. That's the champion, intermediate, novice and junior birds. You judge them almost like a CC lineup. Say there's 26 light greens in the show, you judge them 1 to 26. And then the show secretary can pick out the highest novice, the highest champion, the highest breeder for that, for your section specials. I've already got the paperwork designed, and it's only 2 sheets per class.
You talk to the show secretaries and you get the software out to them.
Yeah, I've done it many times. I've been show manager, etc. But anyway, we can agree to disagree.
We will on this one, but please take that on board. All right.
Yeah, I've got another question here, but I think I can probably answer it myself. Kevin's asked, perhaps we should have a convention early in the coming year for 2020 birds. I think that's already on the cards anyway, isn't it? Because the spring convention of the BS, the young birds are always the year before. So for instance, the spring convention for 2021, the young birds will be 2020 birds anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, that's answered that one. Anything else to say, Phil, or shall I start on some questions?
Yeah, start on some questions.
Shall I? And we've got plenty of time. But Matt Owens has asked, do you think if we brought forward the ring issue date, i.e. to say the 1st of December, in line with Europe, would it benefit, would it benefit the hobby and have more birds benched?
I disagree. I'd prefer to take the ring issue date the other way, further forward. I traditionally pair up Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Now, what that does, if we did all that a later ring issue date, it would put the showing season beyond the summer holidays. These days, most people have a fortnight's holiday during the 6-week school holidays. So you're not showing the week before you go on holiday, you're not going to show while you're away, and you're not going to show the first weekend you come back. So if we can push the show season further back in the year, we would get more entries. If you look at young birds bench now, they're a lot less than what they used to be, because we're pairing up out of season in this September idea. And you talk to some of the breeders on the continent who've done it for years. Some of them pair up in September, snatch around, and then because the round around Christmas is absolutely crap, it's rubbish, they split them up and then repair them again February time. So if you've got beginners and novices having to mess about like this, you're ringing chicks when you've got when it's Christmas time, which is a family time. You're going to get into trouble spending half a day in the aviary when you've got family at home. I think life would be far easier if we went the other way. And we don't have to follow the continent. You know, they have their ways, we have ours. We're now doing Brexit. We're our own people. We think on our own, not as a group. So I disagree. January 1st is a convenient time. Everything is measured from then, but it's your choice to pair up as and when.
So when would you send the rings out, Phil? Would you keep them as they are, sort of 21st of December, or would you actually think make them later, do you?
Well, yeah, but it wouldn't be practical. January the 1st, really the day. All right, we get them a week earlier because of the volume of post at Christmas and New Year, so I can go along with that. But I think really we've got to try and get the show season going back at least a month, preferably 2 months, so that we can get more breeder birds out. As I say, breeder numbers it shows are a lot less than what they used to be. And I can't see the merit of pairing birds up for one round and then splitting them up and resting them a bit and then pairing them up again. Also,
Sorry, I was going to say, does Matt want to come in? Can we unmute Matt, please, Tony? It was his question. Does he want to go forward on that?
No, that's
Matt Owens?
No, that's fair enough. It's just I've been lit on Facebook and some people were saying that the new issue date that we're voting on, the 1st December, isn't enough. And other ones are saying leave it the way it is. So I was just saying what Phil's take on it was. That was all. Okay.
Right. Well, we know now. Phil wants to leave it as it is, roughly.
You can't please all the people all of the time. You can please some of the time. We've had votes on this before, changing the ring issue date, and it's always been voted out. So,
do you think it's going to be voted out this time? Phil, do you think it's going to be voted out this time? Because I think there's 2 votes, I believe, came in, wasn't there? One for a week before, and then one for the 1st of December. Would that be? Am I right in that?
Yeah, I think that's right to catch a mackerel. They're trying to move it further and further to fall in line with the continental issue. But no, I prefer to leave, my personal view, I prefer to leave the ring issue date as it is and leave it to the individual breeder to pair up and breed when he wants. What I would like to see is that the show season is moved further back. You know, we don't put any open shows out till at the earliest August and do it in the later season. Okay.
There was another question from Ray Welfare. Well, I should have asked it earlier, really, because we'd already sort of talked about it. But he asks, what you think? Are there too many classes in our open shows, considering the low number of birds entered in some classes at the moment? I know we shifted round that, but would you like to answer that question?
Oh yeah, I do believe there are far too many classes, far too many. You know, I'd like to see a 14, 16 or an 18 cc for a championship show. Ian would like that, I would believe, Ian Stanley, because that'd be less paperwork in the office for them. And it makes the cc worth winning. When I last did a check on shows, the average entry for a colour cc was 18 catalogue, 16 benched. Well, that's a classic. It's, you know, it's hardly worth talking about.
Yeah.
And even at the club show, it reflects that, you know, some birds are winning CCs and there's only a handful of birds there. You know, so I think we've got to look at consolidating it. And we try these things, and you know, we're all human. If it doesn't work, we can always go back. But you know, get the classes down so we've got good entries.
Right. Next question is from Mark Turner. He wants to know how much is too much to pay for a bird.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. A chap can ask a price and you can think it's good value, or you can decline. You can decide whether it's good value or not. One of the best birds that had, in fact, it goes, the cinnamon yellowface, which I didn't show you, by the way, goes back to a bird. I bought this, as I said, when we used to go on the trips, I've paid €1,000 for a bird at Joe's. Only one, but you know, that's by the way. But we'd gone on the trip, we'd all had the choice, it'd been a free-for-all, and just as we were leaving the aviary, I looked in the sales cage, and there was an Oakland cinnamon light green hen, not a big bird, and I just thought, there's one in that. I just felt there was something about that bird. Joe, how much for the Oakland cinnamon light green hen? Oh, Phil, €100. That was £60 at the time.
Yeah.
That had more effect on my stud than the €1,000 bird.
What about just making me think back to the busload of 26 when the first one, number one, went in there, and he had the pick, and he picked the best bird, and that went in the show cage, and he had to decide on what he was going to pay for it. If that was the best bird in that sales cage, what price would that bird have been, Phil?
In those days, the bulk of the birds were €200. Later, they went up to about €350. And then, of course, the special birds, which were coming out of Joe's keeping flights or whatever, went up, you know, considerably. And really, it was a price when Joe was prepared to let it go. You know, it was a bird he was going to keep anyway to breed from. I'm just looking for this bird, by the way. So you've got to try and tempt him with the money to part with it. But
so the 26 lads went in, and then they you know, the ones that bought the sales birds, fine, and then you all went in afterwards and had a look into some of the other flights which weren't for sale, but they could be if the price was right. Is that right?
Yeah. It was a good money person, was Joe, really. He knew how to do it. That's that goes back to the €100 Oakland cinnamon light green hen. That won the national in 2016, and it's still breeding now.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, you say 2016. What are we now? 2020. So it's 4 years ago. It's still a modern bird now, isn't it?
Oh yeah. That's a descendant this year. Golden faced pied. That's the sky blue that's just coming out of the nest. That's bred me my best youngster this year. I don't know where I've got the hen it was paired to somewhere. That's my older style bird, nearly pure man's. There. That's a brother to it.
A lot of face on the man's birds, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, what I call a complete round face.
Well, of course, the other beauty going on the trip, you see, you could stand back and observe Joe as he was handling the birds. And I mean, one of the first things he did, where he showed us, he'd get hold of a bird, and the depth of mast from the sear down to the bottom of the mast in a cock, it liked to be the same as from the sear to the top of the head, and also the width of the head being the same. So as you just commented, this gives Joe Mans this full moon face, this nice big round face. Yeah. So that was one of the first things we saw. And then the next thing I observed him doing, he was getting hold of a bird and holding the feathers on the cap between his thumb and finger. It got hold of the bird right up to its head. If he couldn't see the feathers through his thumb and finger, he called that a short-feathered bird. If he could just see the tip of the top of the feathers, that was a medium. And if he got a bit of length above the thumb and finger, that was a buff. And so that's how we measured, you know, his feather length. And then the last thing, about the early the early 2000s, people were saying that Joe's birds were short. And then what happened, over 3 seasons, he put nearly an inch on the length of his birds. And what he did, when he caught a bird up, he'd hold its breastbone between his thumb and finger. If you go in your shed and start holding the birds, you know, a group of birds, you'll tell which ones are longer, the keel bone is longer with, even to 1/8 of an inch. So it was using a tool that was with him all the time, and that was his hand. He could use his thumb and finger to measure feather. He could measure between the thumb and finger for width, depth and height, and he could use thumb and finger over the keel bone to decide on length.
Right. Okay. We've got another question here. I'm going to read it out exactly as it said. It's from Kevin. I don't think that's Kevin Pestle, so I'm going to guess it's either Kevin Ball or Kevin. Anyway, it's from Kevin. It's from it's from Kevin Ball. He said, "We're affiliated." Kevin, do you want to ask it yourself? Tony, can you unmute Kevin Ball, please?
I'm just going to sack the wife. She's brought me a tonic without the gin.
Oh, bloody hell.
Should have asked the question.
Cheers.
Okay.
Cheers, Phil.
Phil, obviously coming into presidential year, and it'll be great for next year. So just a question around licensing and financing, given the the BS and everything else in the political debate that we go through. We're affiliated with the WBO, the BS, the same as the rest of the regional BSs across Europe. We spend a lot of money and time spending officials and people and engagements and things like this. So why we got 3 hot potatoes that are formulated across Europe: the ring date, the standard for the bird, and the show cages. So why do we exclude ourselves and not just go, we pay for WBO as a governing body, we'll go by their rules?
Well, I don't want to get into politics, Kevin. That's not my side of the hobby. I enjoy the breeding, etc. I hope when I put any arguments forward that common sense will prevail. I was very disappointed, as you know, I proposed the Ulstringer show cage, and I've yet to find somebody that said they voted against it. But when the actual vote came in, it was defeated, as was the other one for a plastic cage. I do like the Ulstringer cage. I have 26 of them, which you saw in the photos earlier, as a training bank for my young birds. And the beauty is that when I used to show 25, 30 birds, it were a ball's ache every weekend, having to wash the cage out, touch up the black and touch the white up. Whereas with the Ulstringer cage, you tip everything out, you chuck it in the dishwasher, job done. And modern society, the pace of life, that's far more convenient for us than having to do what we have to do now. You know, cleaning the cage out for every weekend, and then touching the cage front up and all the black where it's chipped for the following weekend. So it was a practical thing. And again, I would like to try and repropose that one. Although I do understand that there's perhaps another plastic cage in the offing. So we'll have to wait and see. But of course, touching on what you've said there, Kevin, that show cage would then have been an international show cage. I don't show at the club show because I lend all my show cages to Reaney. You know, it's building a bridge between us and the continent. Whereas, of course, if the Ulstringer cage would have been accepted, Reaney could have shown in his cages and I could have shown in mine. Now, in Ireland, they have a mix. They have the Ulstringer cage and they have the BS cage. A lot of us have judged over there, I know David Warren has, where the cages are mixed, and it doesn't affect our judgment whatsoever. So it's been tried and tested in Ireland for 9 years. So, you know, why we can't follow suit, I don't know. I do believe that Ireland are leading the way on that with common sense and encouraging more people to show. And of course, the thing is that the prominent champions would buy the better cage and sell their other, because I wanted to keep both standards, the current one and the Ulstringer one. So the current standard champions would be selling them cages off at £5 or £10. Beginners can buy 4 of those cages instead of paying £40 and buying 1. So I think all the way down, it would have been a lot better. And of course, they're virtually indestructible. So once we've got a number of these cages in the country, as people pack up or pass away and the cages come for sale, they don't fade, they don't perish, they don't crack. Those cages would last us forever. So I hope that answers your question, Kevin. Are you satisfied?
Kevin, anything else you want to say, Kevin? Kevin, you want to come back?
So I was on mute, John, for a reason.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it just seems with all the money that BS has got, I don't know why it's a license fee for the manufacturer or not. I don't know. It just seems that we complain about the club show being down in numbers. We're not helping ourselves as a club to say, well, it needs to be easier for people to show, less time you can put for people to show. And if you want to call it a world show rather than a UK show, we should allow people to come over from Ireland, Holland, Belgium, France, Germany, and compete without the financial expense above travel of buying specialist cages.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that, Kevin. You know, as I say, that's why I proposed the Ulster cage. But democracy has to be out, and the vote went against it. It doesn't say we can't propose it again, when perhaps people have realised the practicalities of it, and also the unification of all the different organisations in the world, that we could have a world standard cage. So I'm totally with you on that, but you've got to respect that if the vote went the other way, there weren't enough people felt strongly enough to back it. All you can do is improve your argument and try to sell it better.
I think the vote was split because there's more than one alternate cage put up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it happened, so we can't, you know, it's no good going back on it now. It's done, it's past, it's history. We look to the future and try and see, you know, if this cage that's being talked about comes to the fore, or, you know, can we present it again? I mean, the big struggle, of course, is I think there's only one or two show cage manufacturers making our standard cage now. So there's going to be a demand where, you know, we can't get the cages. The minute second-hand show cages come up for sale in cage birds, you can phone within hours of getting the cage birds and they've gone. You know, so there's definitely a shortage of show cages, and, you know, I don't feel it's being addressed. Whether I can make a difference when I get in there or whatever remains to be seen.
What about the standard? Do you think we should be adopting the WBO set standard for the budgegar rather than have an open, at least 8.5 type discussion?
No, I like the current standard, and what I would say, of course, if we start increasing the size of the bird, we have a problem that is the bird now too big for the cage, and we would have to scrap all the current show cages. You look at Gloucester canary breeders, and of course they went bigger is better, and then they finished up with all the problems we've got, feather cysts and all this carry on, and they actually went back. They realised they'd made a mistake and went back to their old standard. And I think part of the skill of a budgegar breeder is getting all those components into a bird that's around 9 inches, not 10.5. And that's part of your skill, you know, getting the balance and the proportion right, and also to fit the current show cage. You know, if we start crossing the animal rights and the Greenpeace thing, that'll be the end of the hobby.
Do you think there should be a limit on the size of a show budgegar, Phil?
Yes, I do. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes we made, and that opened the door for, you know, long-flighted or birds with long-flighted characteristics. When we changed from an actual length, it became at least an actual length, but there was no maximum size. Now, but most small livestock breeders, they have a maximum and a minimum, and I feel that would be a good step forward for us to contain that. I've also designed a cage with a gate. Instead of having a sloping back, this is just as a measuring tool. It doesn't have a sloping back, and it's got concentric circles at 1 centimetre spaces on the back, and it's based from, not from the perch, but from the centre of the bird. you follow what I mean? So you're getting a true length, not an obtuse measurement. And of course, one of them cages could be available to put the bird in at a show type of thing. I've already sold this idea to Trevor Taheen, so when we get together on the council, it may be something that could be looked at. But again, you've got to put the case forward and the argument forward. But going back to your question, yes, I think we need a maximum size, and I say part of the skill of a breeder is getting all those features on the right size bird.
Right, okay. There's so Kev, are you finished, Kevin? Or did you want to come out? Yeah, you finished. Okay. So there's a couple of points brought up by Phil Hogben. I'll just read out a couple of things. He's saying there's a lot of pressure on breeders getting young birds bred and then out onto the show bench. So he said going, later makes sense. But I wonder if the answer is you've either got to go later or go earlier because the time when we've got the rings is wrong. Would you agree with that?
Well, no, I think if we're going earlier, as I say, if you talk to a lot of the continental breeders, they all struggle around Christmas time. They get a good first round and then it drops off. So why not, stick as we are? If the show season was later, I find that by the time the clocks have changed and the lights start stretching out, the birds come fitter and breed a lot easier. So I think the first step I would like to see, this is my opinion, is, as I say, moving the show season later in the year.
And do you think that would happen? Because that'd be moving it up with the CBSs, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. Obviously, the other thing is, from the decline of the hobby, is our CBS is going to become more important again because of cost of hiring halls, hiring judges, etc. Does it make sense to use CBSs where we all share the cost of the show hall? I'm trying to suggest around Lincoln there are 5 local societies: Gainsborough, Newark, Lincoln, Cleethorpes. I've said Gainsborough, I forgot the other one. But why don't we have a nest feather in one show hall for all those 5 shows, and you nominate your show, so you can still pick out your best Gainsborough member. You can get the points for the Gainsborough trophies, and of course, if you're a member of a multitude of societies, you have to nominate which society you're representing that day. But if there were 5 shows, nest feather shows, instead of having half a dozen birds there, you would get 30 or 40 or even more. There's no BS rule that says you can't have a barhead show with challenge certificates. If it's an open show, you can do that. So, right. If a lot of local societies all got together and ran their show on the same day, you could finish up with 150 birds there, and it qualifies for a bronze CC.
Okay. Phil's asked another question. Will the show cage change be proposed again?
That is one of my aims I would like to do, but again, I want to try and make sure there are enough people, your 2/3 majority, that think the show cage is a good idea. And I think that the other thing really is that, all right, all BS members had a vote, but a lot of BS members don't show. So they will only follow the advice recommended by the BS, where really it should be the people who show that have the vote. That's my opinion.
Right, okay. Have we got any more? No, right. No, I'm going to have a question in a minute. Let's see if I've got any others to come. No, it's mine then. Right, me for a question. Lutov. Now, this man is the man of the future, isn't he? He is the man that looks forward. And about 4 years ago, so we were told, he decided he was going to make his birds, he was going to start breeding his birds smaller. Were you involved in that at all? Did you did you hear what he was doing, how he was doing it? But I always joke and say, oh, so 4 years ago he decided he wanted to make his birds look like my birds then.
Yeah, no, as I say, I think we've covered a lot of it with what I've said about the skill of getting those features onto a traditional sized bird. You can't take away from him. I mean, the one thing we start mentioning long flights with that, it's almost like French malt. If you bring that up, you suddenly get a deluge of questions and opinions. But the current showbird that we have originates from long flights, Ken Farmer's long flights. And when the BS said, right, we're banning long flights off the show bench, is that breeders still use them as a tool, as a breeding tool, but only showed the chick because you get a variable penetrance. So you get an extreme long flight down to a normal budgie off the same pair. And of course, all you did was show the birds that conformed with the current BS standard. So breeders of yesteryear were able to breed out the long flight and keep the features that they wanted to enhance the showbird. And I think what happened, I believe there are at least 2 genes or a group of genes involved in long flights. There's the long flight gene and the gene that switches the long flight on. Now, what happened in this country, we virtually bred all the long flights out. The most long flights I ever saw in this country were at Ralph Elston's, and he must have had 20 odd of them. And when he had the old cowshed place, when they flew, they whistled. They were like pigeons. They made that whistling when they were flying. But as I say, we bred them out in this country. Now, what happened is that a prominent breeder of South Africa, Doc Robertson, used to buy birds from England in the 50s and 60s, where he was taking birds over there with the long flight gene. Because in those days the hobby was smaller over there, there was a certain amount of inbreeding going on because they'd only got a limited stock. So what happened is that they kept the long flight gene in their stock they'd got there. And really, we got the increase in long flights back when birds from somebody called Joan de Beer sold birds to Lutoff, and I think also Fred Wright bought some as well. And they brought the switching on gene back. And when those birds were put back into the English birds, hey presto, we got long flights. I actually bought a recessive pied of Lutoff blood. As I showed you earlier, my recessive pieds have been very, very inbred for over 20 years, never bred a long flight. The first time I put this outcross bird into my long flights, the very first chick was a long flight. So it's a gene that can be managed if we all get together and share the data. I'm going into one of the other lectures here, but basically there's a similar gene in chickens where now, instead of chickens being 16 weeks old when we kill them for meat, we now kill them at 42 days. And it's called traploidy, and I think that's the same gene that's in budgerigars. But that's a lecture on its own, so I don't propose to go any further into that. But, you know, they're a tool. We need to use them to get the features off them into a standard bird.
Right. I've got a question here. I should have... hang on, what's that? Sorry, would you... Right. Okay, I've got a question here from Kevin Pesto earlier on that I should have asked earlier, but it's never too late. And he says... I'll read it exactly as he asked it. This is from Kevin Pestle. That's the man with the... It looks like he's in a pub, and he's got a bar at the back of him, yeah. And we're all wondering what all that booze is at the back there. It looks like booze. Anyway, Phil says, Phil, you say 18 birds in the CC lineup, which some show could be less. Is it not the numbers of people not showing rather than the birds entered where the problem lies? Should we not be looking as to why people are not showing?
I totally agree with it. I totally agree with that. That was an average, by the way, 18 birds. Some there's only 2 birds and some there's 14, but the average over a very large cross-section of the shows at that time averaged out at 18 catalogue entry.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, I was very lucky. I mentioned my mentor, Jack Middleton. He encouraged me to show. One of the things that happens with beginners, I remember going to a beginners area in Sheffield saying, why aren't you showing? I haven't got any birds good enough. And I said, well, that Oakland there, that Oakland grey, I said, that's a good bird to show. Why don't you show that? Oh, it's got a dirty back and it's a fault. So it was looking at the standard, and because we don't show the standard, we show our best attempts at the standard compared against other people's best attempts. We're not showing the standard bird. But I think what happens is that people talk their own birds down and think that everybody else has got the perfect bird. We haven't. And when you ask a judge to judge, you're asking him, in his opinion, which he thinks is the bird near to his picture of an ideal bird. So trying to encourage him to show. At Sheffield, I used to, my Cortina estate in those days, early days, I could get 64 show cages in. So of course, we all used to share, you know, I'd go one week with my car, and somebody else would go another week with another car. And this is where the local society comes in, where you could have a central point where the cost of taking the birds to and fro is shared by a number of you. You all put the birds in one car. Would that be a way of encouraging more people to show?
Right. Another question, because we are coming to the end of the evening. So we get a couple more questions in before the end. And there's one here from Matt Owens. It might be a yes or no answer, but he said, would you breed a brother to sister?
Yes.
Wow, okay, right. Matt Owens, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I do a lot of inbreeding on certain families. The whole idea of inbreeding, you see, is that chromosomes are made in pairs. One half of the pair comes from mom, and one half of the pair comes from dad. So if it's a good cock that passes on a good point, the chick has got a 50-50 chance in inheriting the chromosome with that gene on it. If you inbreed, what you're trying to do is to get that gene or modifier on both chromosomes. So no matter which one is passed down to the next generation, it's got that gene in.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, who could argue with you? Three birds put into the BS Club Show and three best in shows. Who can argue with it? There's another question here from Tony Pringle.
Just to
he says, we now have 8 minutes till the end. No, that's not the question. Right. He said, if you could go back in time, Phil, what advice would you give your younger self starting in the hobby?
Walk before you can run. And enjoy, you know, we've got these colour budgies now, and I think the play is that we hope people will take them up and then graduate up to the exhibition bird. Get experience before you start spending this silly money. Another instance I'll tell you, one of my mentors, Stan Wainwright, when he used to go there, he'd sorted his birds for sale out at 3 levels. The bottom level we'll see in those days was £15 and under. The middle would be 15 to 40, and the top ones would be 40 upwards. And I thought, what a brilliant idea. So I had a week off work and graded all my birds. I was doing a lot of winning as a novice at that time. I was winning all over with a collection of birds, not just one bird. And there was quite a demand for the birds. So I did this and advertised the birds. And I went up to stands and I says, how come you've got some of each quality still left? I said, all my middle ones have gone. He says, well, what I do, he says, if it gets like that, I move a few other ones into middle upwards and a few down from top. So, in other words, people tend to buy the middle bird or the dearer bird. I remember another time he'd gone into clear wings and he was doing a lot of winning with them. And I was up at stands this night, and the phone came. You've advertised some clay ones for sale from £25 a pair. Yes, that's right. Have you got, this is on a phone, bear in mind. Have you got any better? Well, yeah, I've got some at £25 a piece. Well, have you got any better than that? He said, well, I've got some at £50 a piece. And if the guy had bothered to turn up, if he got any of them birds at 25 quid a pair. So sometimes the buyer is his own worst enemy, you know. Have a fixed view on, decide what you're after a feature, which is what I did, and go for that feature. Build a bird gradually. You can't be a success overnight, or if you are, it won't last.
Thanks, Phil.
Fabulous. Well, I think it's 9:30, and it'll be a first for us to ever finish on time. But I would like to thank you, Phil, for an absolutely fantastic evening. I've loved it, and I'm sure everyone else has. But I hope most of all, Phil, that you have enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, I was quite nervous about it. As you know, I'm not very computer literate, but thank you very much for your help with that. I hope it's been interesting to everybody, and look forward to meeting you all in person in the years to come.
Yeah, well, we've had between 35 and just under 50, 35 and 45 people in and out tonight. So no, I think that was an absolute success, and it just goes to show that the hobby's not dead. You know, we've got a chance to carry on with our meetings, which we are going to do at Dartford on a monthly basis, and keep the hobby going. And
John, John, I just like to say, I'm not a member of Dartford, but I've really enjoyed this evening, and I think in the current situation that we find ourselves in, this is the way forward. People can't get to a meeting. This is just it's brilliant. And thank you, Phil. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
And thank you, Mark, for saying that. Appreciate it. And you know, if other clubs can't do it for whatever reason, then you know we're happy to take, you know, to take a few members and let them enjoy what we do.
I was going, yeah, but in this situation, it doesn't matter where you are demographically. You could be anywhere in the world and still enjoy being a member of a local club. It's superb.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all very much indeed, and
John,
we'll finish up, and thank you again.
Well done.
Thank you, John. Mr. Stanley, enjoy your scotch.
Kevin, enjoy your scotch. What have you got back there? Is that